They even threw them in jail.
Peter Navarro,
Steve Bannon,
now in prison.
But they couldn't stop them.
There's not a prison bill that will ever shut me up.
They call them rebels.
Basket of deplorables.
They call them rogues.
They claim to guns or religion.
And they say they're outlaws.
These are the kind of guys you like to smack in the ass.
War Room presents Rebels, Rogues, and Outlaws.
You set out to take Vienna. Take Vienna!
The national bestseller by longtime Bannon producer Dan Fluette. Take a journey through the pictorial history of War Room in a culture that celebrates the weak. Show your support by standing with the rebels. Go to doitfluette.com or scan the QR code on your screen. Use the code RAV20 for 20% off your order. Stand with the rebels and never back down.
What happens when the fourth turning meets fifth generation warfare?
A commentator, international social media sensation, and former Navy intelligence veteran.
This is Human Events with your host, Jack Posobiec.
Christ is king.
DC is already safer than it was 9 days ago, but we're going to make it safer still to come. This is your city. You should feel free to come and visit here, have a meal, see all these incredible monuments, and actually enjoy yourself. And that's what we're trying to make happen. And I think that if we set a standard in Washington, D.C., that political willpower can bring some common sense, law and order back to these communities, then maybe some other communities and other cities will follow suit.
For the first time in a long time, D.C. has gone 7 days without a homicide. And that's not all. Carjackings are down 83%. Robberies are down 46%. Car thefts down 21%. And overall violent crime is down 22%.
Former President Barack Obama says he is giving his blessing to California Governor Gavin Newsom's redistricting map. Obama endorsed the map while speaking at a fundraiser for the National Democratic Redistricting Committee. The former president says it would be his preference not to have political gerrymandering, but given the effort in Texas to approve new maps favoring Republicans, he's supporting California's effort.
There are 3 guided missile destroyers deploying off the coast of Venezuela. It's all part of President Trump's plan to help combat drug cartels in Latin America.
3 U.S. guided missile destroyers, the USS Gravely, USS Jason Dunham, and the USS Sampson, are being deployed in these efforts, with some news outlets also reporting that the ships should arrive there imminently off the coast of Venezuela. So this will bring the military posture to about 4,000 sailors and Marines.
Ukraine saying an American electronics plant in the western part of the country is one of the several targets in a massive Russian drone attack overnight. 1 person is dead and 15 people are hurt, according to President Zelensky, who also wrote in a statement, there have been no signal from Moscow that they are really going to engage in meaningful negotiations and end this war. Pressure is needed, strong sanctions, strong tariffs.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, welcome aboard today's edition, Human Events Daily. We're here live in Washington, D.C. Today is August 21st, 2025, Anno Domini. The much safer Washington, D.C., whereas, of course, we just saw the news. Washington, D.C. has, for the first time in a very, very long time, gone an entire week without a single homicide. You'd think, by the way, that wouldn't be something that we'd be cheering about in our nation's capital, but it is, because that's just how bad the situation has become here in D.C. It's one of the reasons that I and many other people that I know in Washington, D.C., that we don't take our kids out, we don't go to the parks. Certainly, if you're going anywhere, you're not going after night. And of course, we also, it's by the way, so President Trump has been talking about the Smithsonian and wanting to fix up the Smithsonian's. And I'm saying, wait a minute, he must be watching Human Events Daily again, because I've been railing against the D.C. museums all year, specifically this summer. I know I talked about the Spy Museum a couple of times, and we've mentioned a few others as well. The museums are an absolute joke. They teach lies as truth when you come into the city, and you just can't do it. You just absolutely can't have it for the kids. So as as a dad, as a father who has young children in the D.C. area, this is absolutely something that I support. Thank you, Mr. President. I've watched all of the videos that have come out thus far, and I haven't seen a single one that I disagree with. Funny enough, you also can't seem to find any of the videos of people being arrested by ICE where they're speaking English. Amazing. Well, folks, we're looking at, of course, the Ukraine-Russia situation. Deal or no deal? And we saw the momentum early on this week, which was huge. Of course, at the tail end of last week, their historic moments in Anchorage, Alaska, the Anchorage Accords that sit down with Vladimir Putin, Sergei Lavrov, and others. Then the multilateral meeting, which came on Monday, just 48 hours later, where you had the heads of 7 world leaders coming to the White House. France, Germany, Great Britain, Italy. They were all there. Ursula von der Leyen, even Alexander Stubb of Finland. But the question is, here's the question. Will the deal come out? Because you've got an issue here, and one of the tensions is short game versus long game, all right? For the Americans, they're looking at it from the perspective of a short game. The Ukrainians are looking at it from the perspective of a short game. So are the Europeans. Because all of those leaders are directly tied to election cycles. They're also directly tied to the current public opinion of the time. The Russians don't have that. So the Russian leadership is looking at this from the long game perspective. And from the long game perspective, they're saying, what kind of deal, what kind of assurances can you give us? What do we want? By the way, I mentioned yesterday how they want to bring the United Nations in. They said UN Permanent Security Council, which would include China. Zelensky then came out yesterday and said absolutely not anything with China. So again, when it comes to these things, and I had the opportunity, real honor, by the way, to be able to sit in that new media seat in the White House and ask the question of our press secretary, Caroline Leavitt, to say, well, when we say security guarantees, what do we mean? Can we elaborate on this? And the devil is in the details, and the devil certainly is in the details here. Because when it comes down to it, a security guarantee from the West means that that country, whether it be the United States, France, England, Germany, you've got to roger up and deploy troops to be willing to go to war with Russia. And no country, not even Poland, has been willing to do that over the last 3.5 years. Are we going to get a deal or not? We'll see. We've got General Flynn coming up next. I'm going to get his take on it. Human Events Daily returns. Real America's Voice. Right back.
Tired of the hassle and high costs of selling a home? We can help. At Ideal Agent, we'll connect you with a top local agent that'll sell your home fast for top dollar, and all this for as low as a 2% commission.
We got the top dollar for our house and the lowest commission that I could have imagined. The house sold in 2 days. It was so exciting for us.
Ideal Agent is available nationwide. There's no obligation, and best of all, our service is completely free. Call today or visit idealagent.com.
Stay tuned to get a free automatic toilet bowl cleaner from Mermaid. Your sink stopper's broken, but fixing a drain is such a pain. Not anymore. Introducing Mermaid Drain Magic, the instant solution to most broken drains. Simply remove and replace. In just seconds, you can fill and drain with a simple press of a button. Drain Magic makes replacing your old, broken, rusty, even missing sink stoppers fast and easy.
Practically took me 5 seconds to replace. It absolutely made my sink look like brand new.
Honestly, I couldn't believe it. How could it work so well, look so good, and install so quickly?
And forget clogging, because Drain Magic's anti-clogging basket helps catch debris before it goes down the drain. When the basket's full, just discard. Helps prevent clogs in your sink by catching hair, food, even jewelry. Drain Magic uses a silicone gasket that creates a watertight seal without messy plumber's putty. Look, this sink was filled hours ago and the water still remains. Press the spring-loaded stopper and the water's gone. Made of brass and finished in high-quality chrome, Drain Magic is rust-resistant and built to last.
It's made out of metal, not plastic, and it actually has some weight to it.
Yeah, this is the real deal. It just looks like a new sink now.
Order your 2-in-1 drain solution, Mermaid Drain Magic, today for only $19.99. And with every order, you're going to get a Mermaid automatic toilet bowl cleaner absolutely free. Just drop it in the tank for up to 3 months of hands-free cleaning. Mermaid's ultra-concentrated formula cleans and deodorizes with every flush. But wait, due to rising costs, this may be your last chance to get Mermaid Drain Magic at this incredibly low price with free Mermaid toilet bowl cleaner. There's a strict limit of 3. Call or click now to order.
Call 1-800-519-3206 or visit getdrainmagic.com. So call 1-800-519-3206 or visit getdrainmagic.com. Order now.
Nothing will stand in our way, and our golden age has just begun.
This is Human Events with Jack Posobiec.
Now it's time for everyone to understand what America First truly means. Welcome to the Second American Revolution.
All right, Jack Posobiec, here we are back live, Human Events Daily, Washington, D.C. Folks, did you know that in the last 6 weeks, 86 million AT&T users had their name, address, and social security numbers leaked? Or that the CCP is harvesting massive volumes of Americans' personal data to train DeepSeek and other AI systems? When you're online doing the work like I am, you need that digital camouflage. And that's why I've partnered with who? Our newest show sponsor, Patriot Protect. Patriot Protect removes your personal data from the internet. So whether it's Google, Amazon, or Apple, your personal data will be wiped so that scammers and cyber criminals and swatters, like the ones that tried to come after the Poso family, will not and cannot find your data. And you can take back your security and your privacy. Once Patriot Protect scans and scrubs your personal information, they'll continuously monitor your info to make sure every new instance of a possible data breach is eliminated immediately. I'm talking 24/7 protection for the cost and keeping the porch lights on. The only thing worse than getting hacked is knowing you could have stopped it and didn't take action when you could have. So go to patriot-protect.com/POSO and use promo code POSO for 15% off a yearly subscription. That's patriot-protect.com/POSO and use promo code POSO for 15% off a yearly subscription. patriot-protect.com/POSO. Very excited here on Human Events Daily today, Real America's Voice, that we've got a very special guest rejoining the program from Washington, D.C. It's General Michael T. Flynn. General Flynn, how are you?
I'm doing great, Jack. Thanks for having me on. It's a very, very important day here. And I was listening to the earlier part of the show about the lack of murders in our capital, which is where I'm at right now. And it's sad that we even have to report on that, but we do. So good on President Trump for doing what he did.
Oh, it's incredible, and I can't wait to see that ride along later today. I'm sure that's going to be quite the entourage he'll have with him security-wise.
Exactly.
But hopefully he won't need as much as usual.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I'm actually here in Washington, D.C. I had a great meeting with the Secretary of Defense this morning on some other issues, but very important time that we are in right now. A lot of things still coming out from the DNI and I think DOJ over the weekend. So a lot of things happening. In addition to, I know what you wanted to talk about really was this deal or no deal, right? Are we going to get a peace deal between Russia and Ukraine, and frankly, Russia and the West, as we saw Trump meeting with damn near half of the European Union and NATO the other day. So I think where we're at right now, and one little piece of intel, and I'm not sure a lot of people tracked the breach. It was a cybersecurity attack against Ukraine recently being in the last 96 hours. And there was a range of data. One of the points of data was the number of killed in action over the last 3 years. The records of the deceased were actually part of the attack. And we're looking at 1.7 million people that have been killed in this war just in the last 3 years alone. So during the Biden administration, so when President Trump says we got to stop the killing, I mean, the numbers of deceased that were reported on, and then now from this breach of this cyber attack, and we don't sure who exactly did it yet, whether it's the Russians or whether it's the Chinese or whether it's internal. no clue yet, but the numbers of killed in action, civilians and military, is just staggering. So there has to be some recognition of those numbers for those that are trying to come to grips with how do we achieve a long-lasting peace deal, right? Not a ceasefire that they typically don't end well, but a long-term peace agreement. And I do think that there's going to be some security guarantees that are going to have to be given to Ukraine. I've called for, Jack, an election, an immediate election in both Ukraine, and in that election, a referendum of sorts for not only the president of the country of Ukraine, the government of Ukraine, but also a referendum on what the people in those eastern Donbasses want to do. Give them a choice, right? We want to have people given the freedom to choose, where they stand. You give those people a choice as well. We can do those things. We've set those kind of international elections up. We've monitored them. The United States of America, there's nobody does it better if we have the right people, and we're not trying to sway a country one direction or another. So those are just a couple of things that need to be considered as we go forward in coming up with a peace negotiation and a peace deal. Never mind I think what can be huge benefits will be an economic, and we have the best president in our history to be at the helm right now in the United States to come up with probably one of the best economic deals between not only Ukraine and Russia, but between Russia and Europe and Russia and the rest of the world. So there's so much at stake there. The other thing that I have asked for, and I've spoken about, is I kind of call it a mini Marshall Plan. Most people don't remember the Marshall Plan post World War II, where we rebuilt all of Europe. So we would have to come up with some type of mini Marshall Plan, if you will. And I know that's on the table, not necessarily in that name, but a reconstruction effort inside of Ukraine. And frankly, you could help out Russia as well, because there's been some things that have been destroyed in there too. But some type of a mini Marshall Plan that is part of this long-term peace agreement that allows people to come together and rebuild and retool what it is that we need to have, not only in Eastern Europe, but certainly, globally, and certainly for all of Europe, to stop this fighting. We have to stop this fighting, to stop this killing. And neither side, Jack, can afford it any longer. The manpower is not there. The economies are not there. And more attrition is not in anybody's benefit, except for probably the CCP. I think that one of the great beneficiaries here is China. So let me stop there if you have any questions.
So the question I have is going back to, and I asked Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt about this on Tuesday in the White House, is also an elaboration of these security guarantees, because we hear from some reports that they're talking about Article 5 like guarantees. We hear NATO, but no NATO. President Trump says unequivocally no U.S. troops on the ground, possibly some air. But when it really comes down to it, doesn't this all run up against the deadlock of you're going to need some country, then if you're providing those security guarantees, you're going to need some country to be able to say that they're willing to go to war with Russia and be willing to put actual boots on the ground in a scenario like this. And I'm looking around and I just don't see anyone in Western Europe or the United States, quite frankly, that's going to be saying that they're willing to do so.
Yeah. So a couple of things, Jack. First of all, Ukraine does not meet the conditions to join NATO. They just don't. They also do not meet the conditions to join the European Union. So those are pretty high standards. And there's still countries in the Balkans that are trying to join the European Union, but they have not been able to because they can't meet the conditions to join that particular consortium. So that just put that in a box. Now what we're talking about is the potential to deploy military forces in some type of posture, maybe as a barrier force, in between, in sort of a no man's land between the two countries. So who is going to do that? And the question there is, should it be NATO or should it be the European Union? Because the European Union has a military force all of its own. So it doesn't necessarily, the answer doesn't have to be NATO. And I also want people to understand that as we go forward, one of the important parts of what is happening and what's been going on is the destruction is so monumental that there's going to have to be some sit down. So you achieve a peace agreement, but part of that peace agreement has to be a recognition that we are going to have to rebuild parts of that country, in this case Ukraine, and probably certainly elements along the border, certainly some of the cities and towns along the border, as well as even into the Crimea area. So those elements. Is it the European Union that should step in and help there? Is it the world? Is it countries like the Republic of Korea? Is it Japan? Are there other countries that step into this role? What I do not recommend is I do not recommend the United Nations stepping in, because I think it would become a quagmire of sorts, and it's the wrong direction to take. I think that there has to be a direct responsibility by Europe. And I think principally the European Union, more so than NATO, because NATO is what it is. It has a high standard of coming and joining. It is a defensive charter. When they talk about Article 5, what does that mean? Does that mean if something happens, how do you prove that what happened? Then do you respond to it immediately? Do you gather the intelligence and you do the analysis as to what happened before you make decisions to deploy troops against, in this case, Russia? So big questions. And I do think that Europe, and that's why I'm so glad that Trump had that mini summit, really a European summit in the Oval Office. They're the ones that are going to have to take responsibility. I think President Trump is doing all he can to bring the capabilities, the intellect, and the resources of the United States to help where we can help. But we have other issues, and he knows this, right here at home that have to be dealt with. Not only our border, not only our own streets and making them safe, as he's done in Washington, D.C., but we've got to rebuild our military. We've got to retool our military. We've got to get
We certainly do. General Flynn, we've got a quick break coming up. Let's hold there. I want to hold you over after this, because this is a thorny Gordian knot, if you will, the Odyssean knot. President Trump, if anyone can solve it, it will be him. Right back, Jack Posobiec, Human Events on Real America's Voice.
Fellow Americans, did you know a war is being waged right now for how you spend your hard-earned dollars? Over 100 countries worldwide are preparing to switch to a digital currency. Now, this means cash will be replaced by money governments can monitor and track. This tracking makes it possible to collect data from every purchase you make and the ability to decide what you can buy and when you can buy it. What's more, your assets can be frozen or even seized. I'm appalled at such an assault on financial privacy. My friends at Swiss America have a report called The Secret War on Cash, with an action plan to protect your financial privacy. So please, call or text the number on your screen for a free copy. With the growing reality of a government-backed digital currency, the time to act is now. So call or text the number on your screen for your free Secret War report.
What's your plan, huh? Do you have one? Talking about what is your plan for a reliable source of power when the next emergency strikes. Well, check this out. It's called the Patriot Power Generator 2500, and right now it's $500 off at 4 Patriots. See, they took a page out of the military's playbook for portable solar power, and now we get to use it in our own homes. What's even better is that this solar generator can power critical appliances like your fridge, your microwave, and your CPAP machine, so that you're prepared for whatever emergency strikes next. Go to 4patriots.com now and save $500.
Did you know that thousands of authors across the country have written books and published them with Page Publishing? If you've written a book, Page Publishing can help you through the process. We cut through the confusion of the publishing world to make it easy for you. If we decide to publish your book, your work ends and ours begins. From copy editing and proofing to typesetting and book cover art, we get you printed, distributed, and sold on Amazon, Apple iTunes, and in bookstores across the country. We'll even help you promote your book. That's right, we do all this for you. Biography, self-help, mystery, novels, sci-fi, even a children's book. No matter what genre, Page Publishing can bring your book to life. Call today for your free author submission kit and find out how you can be the next published author at Page Publishing.
Call for your free writer's guide, 800-319-0257. That's 800-319-0257, 800-319-0257, or scan the QR code now.
Today, they talk about influencers. These are influencers, and they're friends of mine. Jack Posobiec. Where's Jack? Jack, he's done a great job.
All right, Jack Posobiec back live here, Human Events Daily, Washington, D.C. We're on today with General Michael Flynn. He just met with Secretary Hegseth. He's here in Washington, D.C. as well, getting up to speed and briefed in on a lot of different things that are going on, talking about rebuilding the force. But General Flynn, I wanted to get into, and if we could, from a military intelligence perspective, since we do have your expertise with us and you've been gracious with your time. When you look at the battlefield right now, and this is something that I've brought up again and again with my contacts in D.C. as well as when I was on this trip with up to Anchorage and then back in the White House for this multilateral, the Midi Summit. The military situation on the battlefield, it's favoring the Russians at this point. And so when we're talking about this deal, I think everyone needs to remember that the Russians either have to agree or disagree. And right now, there's a lot of people to the right of where Putin is right now in the Kremlin saying, why make a deal at all? Why not just keep going, take Odessa, work our way up the river to Kiev, and just be done with the whole thing? Because we've had deals, we've had Minsk Accords and Budapest agreements and memorandums, and they never seem to be followed. So why not just go for the whole thing? And it seems to me that it's easier for the Russians to walk away right now than it is for us, and they seem more willing to.
Yeah. And I wrote about this the other day where I said, to the victor goes the spoils in war. But in this case, the victor so far is Russia. And so you're exactly right to raise this issue, because the Russians may not hold the moral high ground, but they hold the ground. And they're in a much better posture militarily than the Ukrainian military. Now, when you talk about an array of forces, when you look at the size and scale and capabilities of the Russian military compared to the Ukrainian military is much different. And despite all of the potential equipment sales and provisions that have been given to the Ukrainians, they are running out of fighting age males because of the number of losses that they have had, and frankly, the defections. And what's one of the indicators that you look for from a military intelligence perspective? You look at the morale and inside of the opposing force that you're facing. And I can tell you the morale inside the Ukrainian military is not high. And the fact that they're now having to force much older men, in this case 60-year-olds and above, to come into the military to be able to fight on the front lines. So I don't know if Russia has the ambition. There are probably some on the far right in Russia, far right of Putin, and that means really far right, that want to go and take over Kyiv and all of Ukraine. But I actually think that there is a group around Putin that says, look, we hold this ground right now. We're in a really strong negotiating position. We want to maintain what we have and basically hold what we have and keep that as our strategy, and not necessarily threaten all of Europe, which the Russians don't have the capability to do that. So anybody that says, well, NATO's worried about Russia attacking across the plains of Europe, that's not the Warsaw Pact anymore. They do not have the rear end, the capacity, the capability to do that. They have barely the capability to do what they're doing in Ukraine, but they hold the ground right now. And you use the term Odessian knot. That people need to pay really close attention, because Odessa, Crimea, and the Black Sea are parts of this deal that Russia desperately needs, because there is an economic angle to this war. That's where President Trump.
Well, I've said for a long time, and maybe this may be my bias as a Navy guy, but when I look at the port city of Odessa, the Dardanelles Strait, the mouth to the Black Sea, I say, this is everything. This is everything right here.
It is probably the most strategic point that the Russians have ever held And it's something that we're going to have to deal with. We have to work with them. There's still control mechanisms within the Black Sea. You mentioned the Dardanelles, of course, the Eastern Mediterranean. So when you look at the bigger picture here, Jack, it's not just these eastern provinces of Ukraine. There is a much bigger play here. And this is where we're going to have to try to figure out in a long-term peace deal, what does that mean? Does it mean constant direct access by the Russian Black Sea Fleet to be able to exit and entrance, the Dardanelles Strait to get into the Mediterranean and then operate in the east, at least in the Eastern Med? They have not been able to do that for a long, long time. And they only started to do that back around, probably 10 years ago, when they brought their Black Sea Fleet out to actually support our operations against ISIS in Syria, when the United States of America and the U.S. military and Russian forces were working together. That was at the tail end of really it was probably the middle of the Obama administration. So, there's so much history here that we have to, in recent history, that we have to understand to be able to have this negotiated settlement that has a long-term value to it, a long-term value proposition, not just something that is a ceasefire, which will end, the next time somebody blinks the wrong way. So that map that you're showing is so meaningful. And I do know that there's some other things that are going to be in play here. I love the fact, and let me just throw this in because it matters. Trump's pressure on Venezuela right now. Okay. Russia has a long-term, and they have sites inside of Venezuela. Venezuela is right off of our borders here, folks. So this pressure that Trump is providing against Venezuela right now matters to these negotiations. This is why when people talk about 3D, 4D, 5D chess, Trump is a master at this, and he's got levers of power and levers of authority that he's able to exert when he goes in to bring these two presidents together. Last point, Jack, and I'll get off my high horse. In the Oval Office, there was a question to Zelensky about, are you going to have an election again? You declared martial law, right? And he says, well, no, we can't have an election until the war's over. Wait a second. As I wrote about the other day, during the American Civil War, we've had elections. During World War II, we've had elections. So that's a misnomer. For Zelensky to say that, to me, that means he's in a very weakened position. And the Russians know that. I believe yet Europe knows that. He's in a weakened position because the people, and I think we talked about this maybe off camera, the people in Ukraine, this is 60-70% in a recent Gallup poll that said, we don't want this war anymore.
They want to negotiate and end this thing.
That's
General
right.
Flynn,
So
we've got to run. I know you've got to run. You've got a number of meetings. I want to thank you for being so gracious with your time. Where can people go to follow you and get all your access to your state reps?
And they go to generalflynn.com. Generalflynn.com. I got a new book out, Pardon of Innocence. It's a great bestseller. So generalflynn.com. Thanks, Jack.
Generalflynn.com. Get that book. Make sure you're supporting a great American general. Be right back. Human Events Daily, America's Voice.
It's just like our new house. I hope you have an American Home Shield warranty. Leaky toilet? Fixed. Oven beyond repair? If AHS can't fix your covered item, then replace it, no matter its age. Sign up today at ahs.com.
US Med, a trusted supplier of diabetes equipment for nearly 30 years, has great news for people living with diabetes and the pain of regular testing. New Medicare and private insurance guidelines have expanded coverage for continuous glucose monitors, even for people not using insulin. The days of repeated, painful finger sticks are over. Now you can wear a continuous glucose monitor, or CGM, and eliminate routine finger sticks. US Med has the newest models of CGM, which are more accurate and convenient than ever. CGMs are shown to lower your A1C, increase your time in range, and reduce the risk of hypoglycemic events. Shipping is free, and will even bill your insurer directly. Don't spend one more painful day testing your blood sugar. Call now to get your continuous glucose monitoring system so you can take control of your diabetes and get back to enjoying life.
Call US Med now.
Tired of the hassle and high costs of selling a home? We can help. At Ideal Agent, we'll connect you with a top local agent that'll sell your home fast for top dollar, and all this for as low as a 2% commission.
We got the top dollar for our house and the lowest commission that I could have imagined. The house sold in 2 days. It was so exciting for us.
Ideal Agent is available nationwide. There's no obligation. And best of all, our service is completely free. Call today or visit idealagent.com.
He became one of the world's greatest leaders. He changed the course of history. Now, Lech Walesa, the Nobel Peace Prize winner, is coming to North America on his first ever Grand Lecture Tour. Be part of this historic event. Meet the global leader live on stage as he takes you behind the scenes of history's greatest turning points and the greatest challenges of our time. Join the conversation that will shape our future. Register now at historyexplorer.com.
The bathroom of your dreams is only a phone call away with BCI Bath and Shower. We can make your ordinary bath and shower extraordinary. This is not a cookie cutter design. This is a complete custom build that will fit your every need, and discounts for seniors and military.
And Jack, where's Jack? Where's Jack? Where is he? Jack, I want to see you. Great job, Jack. Thank you. What a job you do. You know, we have an incredible thing. We're always talking about the fake news and the bad, but we have guys, and these are the guys who should be getting Pulitzers.
All right, Jack Posobiec, here we are back. Human Events Daily, Washington, D.C. We're talking about deal or no deal. What is the situation? Does it seem like the deadlock, the diplomatic deadlock, is locked in? Or will President Trump, ironically, be going to Alaska to thaw the ice? Well, he certainly has thawed it in a sense with Russia. The question is, will he be able to get Europe to come along? Wanted to get Lieutenant Colonel Tony Shaffer on right now. We just had General Flynn give us his sit rep, and I wanted to bring Tony Shaffer on now. Lieutenant Colonel Shaffer, how are you?
Hey, I'm well, Jack. Always great to join you. Thanks for having me.
Oh my gosh. So Tony, you know, I always tell people that every time I have you on, you've got to take the biggest victory lap ever, because Tony Shaffer was the one who told us, look to the end of July. The end of July is when all of Ukraine is going to blow up. There's going to be counteroffensives. There's going to be all this stuff going on. And nobody in the world was talking about it except for Tony Shaffer. And that's exactly what happened. Not only did we see that breakout by the Russian forces, but it also triggered worries about a collapse in Ukraine, and then this huge, monumental, historic swing of diplomatic meetings with President Trump, Vladimir Putin, and the multilateral mini summit at the White House. So kudos to you, Tony, for just nailing that. So Tony, and we're just playing a clip of the summit there. So Tony, when you look at things, you saw that at the beginning of the summer, you saw that this would be an inflection point. Where do you see things as it stands now?
Well, to summarize the military situation, it's dire for Ukraine. I don't think people fully understand it. I think President Trump has people around him who are not quite being honest with him regarding how bad it is. The whole Pokrovsk encirclement. Anybody can go. There's a number of outlets which are covering this, and the Russians, while they're not anxious to get it done, they are getting it done, and they're strangling off the last effective forces. Azov Brigade is there deployed. The Azov Brigade is being essentially used as kind of a stopgap to stop the inevitable. It's just coming, and once it happens, it's going to be catastrophic for the Ukrainian military. There's been some leaked documents, which I don't necessarily think are completely accurate, but there are indications that finally the word is out about the enormous losses of Ukraine. And Jack, we've talked about this from the beginning of the war. The Russians have an order of magnitude more people to throw at this, and they don't have to do it all at once, and they're not. So I think that Vladimir Putin, probably had a private conversation with President Trump saying, look, this is all over. We're kind of holding back because, we don't see the need to be, aggressive to the point of where we have to go to the Dnieper, but we're going to continue to move forward. And I think that's the military situation. The diplomatic situation, the Europeans, Jack, continue to drag their feet. You saw Merz, the German chancellor, saying, we want this the ceasefire. Nobody's going to go for a ceasefire at this point who understands the situation. And the Russians most certainly will not, because they're winning. So I think that's the situation. And the question becomes, will President Trump have the force of will, I'd like to believe, within the next 10 days to get Vladimir Putin and Volodymyr Zelensky together in a room somewhere where they can sit down and hash out the two issues which remain. What exactly does security guarantees mean? Because that's the big issue. And secondly, what land is going to go where regarding the outcome? And I know there continues to be this reluctance to give up the land the Russians hold, but I just don't see any way out of giving some land to the Russians. So that's the way I see the situation right now.
And it really comes down to it. And I've seen, I saw one report earlier this morning saying that Zelensky is at least privately conceding that he likely will have to agree to a frozen conflict along at least the contact line where it is now, which is strikingly similar to those old maps of Novorossiya, the idea of New Russia or Malorussia, like the Little Russia, that they would show. You go back to the Russian Civil War. This was very much the same area where the White Army was able to make some of their final stand against the Bolsheviks. So these are cities. These are, and when I say cities, I mean towns, villages, farmlands that have seen war after war after war. So in the Russian Civil War, which of course in this program I've talked about at great length, as well as of course World War II, many of the same areas. I mean, when people look at a map, the Battle of Kursk, it happens right there, and then Stalingrad is really not much further to the east of Donbass. And I think people need to remember that Donbass is sort of the door to, it's not Stalingrad anymore, it's Volgograd now, but really the door to the Volga, and then that cuts you right up to Moscow. So this is key strategic land for the Russians, something that they fought for a long, long time, and something that they take very seriously.
Yeah, and to that point, I still see this entire engagement as a form of civil war. I just don't believe we should have been ever involved to the level we are at this point. With that said, if anyone who looks at the Battle of Kursk, the Battle of Stalingrad, once those major engagements were done, once the Russian military had open field, they took it. And I mean fast. So I keep hearing Keith Kellogg and others say, well, they've been at war for 3 years and they've not made a lot of gains. They don't have to. The basic philosophy and strategy is attrition. They want to demilitarize Ukraine, which is, and frankly, NATO as well, and that's what they've been doing. And the other thing, Jack, I find interesting is this whole idea of a security guarantee, security force. Many of the European nations are not prepared to do anything. I mean, I think the British Army right now is smaller than the Mississippi National Guard. So I just don't know how the European militaries, who were significant during the Cold War, have been reduced to probably 1/10 of their size during that time, and how how they want to put boots on the ground constantly. Jack, it's insane. And I think one of the things that has to be introduced to the conversation is reality. So much of what I see posturing from the Europeans is based on fiction. And I think President Trump has to be a lot more vigorous. I know he's trying to be polite and diplomatic. And he did call out Mertz, but he's got to be a lot more direct about what President Trump, wants regarding an end state, because left to the devices of both sides, it's never going to happen. He's got to be the leader. He's got to set up the framework, and he's got to say, this is what has to be done, and go with that. I think that's the only way this is going to be resolved.
In fact, and if you look at that video when they're all sitting there around the table in the multilat, when Maris brought that up about, and we're going to push for a ceasefire, and we need a ceasefire, we need the preconditions for the ceasefire before we move to peace talks, you see Maloney just gives him the eye roll. Right. It's just like, what are you talking about here? And then Trump kind of looked at him with the side eye and says, I've done 6-7 peace deals in wars all around the world, and none of them followed this standard of a ceasefire and then a peace deal. We just went right to the peace deal. And I have to commend the president as well for just having that willingness to say, we're going to cut through all this bureaucratic red tape. It's very, by the way, very old world to have to go through multiple layers of bureaucracy to get to a deal. Here, and I think someone at one point in the meeting said, let's try to get the date on a date on the books for a month from now for the next meeting. He goes, a month? A month? No, let's call him right now. And he calls Putin right in the middle of the meeting.
Yeah. Well, see, that's to me, this was a bringing back of the TV show The Apprentice, the European edition, where he's basically
exactly. I love that.
Think about this. I have never seen, and I talked to a lot of reporters about this too. They have never seen every major leader in Europe drop everything and show up in DC because of your point. These visits are normally planned out incrementally over like 6 months, and everything is very work straight. No. Basically, we're going to have a talk. If you want to talk, you show up, you be at the table. Otherwise, we're moving on. And I think, Jack, that's what's got to continue. You can't, you can show no fear to the Russians. You can give no deference to the Europeans because either side's going to bog you down. So you got to continue to go forward. And again, that's why I think it's so important that President Trump personally called for Zelensky and Putin to meet with him somewhere next week, maybe Budapest.
Well, and you've heard Budapest as a potential, although Zelensky, I've also heard is really throwing cold water on that because you've got a really big row between them and the Hungarians to talk about. And I saw the two foreign ministers going back and forth. We've got a quick break coming up. We can get into that a little bit. But some real questions about the bombing of a pipeline going from Ukraine into Hungary that was providing the gas, and the Hungarians coming out and saying, Peter Sziarto, the foreign minister who I've interviewed on this program, has said, wait a minute, we're not getting bombed by the Russians, we're getting bombed by the Ukrainians. So you don't just get to turn around and blame the other guys for that. You're the ones who did it. So you're already seeing a lot of this regarding Budapest. So we'll see. We'll see if Budapest is a likely option. I think if President Trump wants to get it done, I know he'll be able to get it done. I'll be right back here. Jack Posobiec, Lieutenant Colonel Tony Shaffer, Human Events Daily on Real America's Voice.
Thinking about buying a new cell phone? Think AMAC. AMAC members have access to special pricing on talk, text, and data plans for as little as $10 per month. It's one of the many ways joining AMAC can save you money on everyday things. But that's not all AMAC has to offer. AMAC is America's leading conservative advocacy and benefits organization, guided by the principles of faith, family, and freedom. So when it comes to saving money on cell phones and service, think AMAC.
Think of all the places that could expose you to identity theft and financial loss. It only takes one mistake at your bank, hospital, or employer for a criminal to gain access to your personal information. And if they do, you and your money are at risk.
$110,000 of my hard-earned money gone.
With LifeLock, if your identity is compromised, we'll step in and fix it so you don't have to, guaranteed. Our dedicated U.S.-based restoration specialists handle your case from start to finish. They contact institutions on your behalf, dispute fraudulent charges, and more. In fact, we're so confident that restoration is guaranteed. Plus, LifeLock offers the $1 Million Protection Package with coverage up to $3 million.
When I opened my mail and I had a check from LifeLock, they made me whole.
Call now or go online and use promo code 35OFF to save 35% off an annual plan for your first year. Enroll now.
Are you disabled and can no longer work? This is an important message for you. Are you between the age of 45 and 63 and need help filing for disability benefits, or were denied by your insurance company or the Social Security Administration?
Call Premier Disability at 1-800-427-8055 now.
Whether you're a first-time filer or filed before and were denied, you'll pay nothing unless you are approved for benefits. Thousands of disability claims are unnecessarily denied each month.
Call Premier Disability at 1-800-427-8055 now.
Work with a team who will fight to get you the benefits you deserve, who understands the physical, emotional, and potential financial impacts, and will share their insider expertise. There are time limits to apply for benefits. If you are between the age of 45 to 63 and need help filing a disability claim, or filed previously and were denied, call our helpline now.
Jack is a great guy. He's written a fantastic book. Everybody's talking about it. Go get it. And he's been my friend right from the beginning of this whole beautiful event. And we're going to turn it around and make our country great again. Amen.
All right, Jack Posobiec, we're back on live here, Human Events Daily. And here's what we're getting out from, I'll just read a couple of the headlines on Ukraine, Russia. So Russia saying Ukraine is not interested in long-term peace. The Guardian, and you know, of course, take it with a grain of salt, but the Guardian saying Trump is stepping back from Russia and Ukraine peace talks for now, according to their sources. Reuters coming out and confirming what I said, 2 days ago now in the White House press briefing room. They're saying, by the way, I love this. Reuters claims it's an exclusive. I said this in the press briefing room 2 days ago. They're saying, Putin's demand to Ukraine, give up Donbass, no NATO, and no Western troops. Interesting, because pretty sure somebody said that in the White House press briefing room a couple of days ago, but that's all right. That's all right, Reuters. You can have your fun. Europeans back Zelensky in Washington, et cetera, et cetera. People are talking about slow walking it now. So I want to go back to Tony Shaffer here. Lieutenant Colonel Shaffer, you know, what we're talking about in terms of this military situation is really the onus isn't on the Russians. The onus is on everyone who wants peace, because the Russians, I think, have made it pretty clear that if they want to hold this conversation with Ukraine, they're doing so on the battlefield and certainly every night. And they're not holding up. They hit this factory last night, and people are arguing about what exactly it was, but apparently it was some U.S. ties to the company that was involved in the defense sector there. We know, of course, the U.S. has been supplying weapons to Ukraine since the very start, so there's no surprises there. But it really seems, though, that, like I said to General Flynn, it's much easier for the Russians to walk away from this than it is for us and the Europeans.
Well, that's the issue. The Russians will insinuate a military solution unless something else is acted upon. And they will not be acted upon. They are acting. And this is where I think Putin, and Jack, you were there. Look, Putin showed a great deal of respect to President Trump. I think it's absolutely correct that Putin would not have invaded. I think Joe Biden opened that door by saying that we, the United States, would accept a limited incursion. Well, that's kind of what happened. So I think at this point, it's going to come down to the power of personality and trying to put these guys in the same room. And the other thing that happened today is Zelensky, basically, it was, I think Lavrov said that the Russians believe the Russian-speaking provinces need to be Russian, and they would accept that. That's an acceptable outcome. And of course, Zelensky immediately vetoed it, saying, no, everything is Ukrainian, then they will speak Ukrainian. So that's part of the problem. So again, I think there's nothing the Ukrainians have left other than bluster. And again, I agree with President Trump. We need to do something to stop the unneeded death. People and Ukrainians are dying, Jack, on a daily basis for no good reason. The war is over. And I think this is where we have to find a way to force the Ukrainians to understand putting your people forward in their 60s and under 20. Yeah, it's not a good look, and it's not going to gain them anything militarily. And I hope President Trump can make that point.
Well, and I'm also looking that Professor John Mearsheimer is out again, and he's been saying this quite a bit lately, but he's out again in First Post right now, saying that he doesn't think that a deal is possible, not from the U.S. and Russian side, but again from the Ukrainian and European side. He says that the two countries are poles apart, talking about Ukraine and Russia. No compromise acceptable to both sides is in sight. And even though President Trump has made these incredible diplomatic flourishes, his personal diplomacy is not going to substitute for hard military realities, and says that ultimately this conflict will be decided on the battlefield.
Well, again, unless otherwise directed by President Trump, unless he's able to insinuate himself, the outcome is going to be a military one, and it's not going to be one that the Ukrainians like. The Russians, if they so choose, would, I think, easily be able to partition Ukraine into two halves. Once they're done with the current line of contact, they could go all the way up to the Dnieper, essentially forcing a partition. And then there's Odessa. Odessa is something still that the Russians would like to have. And if I were the Ukrainians, I'd thank my lucky stars that they don't have it yet. And of course, the Europeans want to put boots on the ground into Odessa and some other places. Again, Jack, I think the Europeans are way out of their league. The Europeans, I think, have been the biggest deterrent. That meeting that you attended with the president and Putin should have happened 3 months ago, but it was because of their obstinance and unwillingness to be reasonable. I think it delayed it to this point. Given if you leave it to them, they will delay it another 3 months. And I don't think Ukraine has 3 months left to go.
Tony, when you're looking at these, what's interesting to me is they're talking about these 4 fortress cities in the Donbass region, that last piece of Donetsk that has yet to fall. And these are really the most fortified pieces of it. And you've been coming on here talking about the importance and strategic importance of these cities in this area, because these are the last fortifications all the way up to the river. And now the media hasn't talked about this at all until suddenly this week, when the Russians are saying, just pull out of those cities and let us have them. Now, all of a sudden, the media is admitting that actually those are the last 4 cities that are left, and there are really no defensive fortifications between there. That's Kramatorsk and Slavyansk and the rest, all the way up to the river. I said, wait a minute, that's what Tony was saying the entire time. And when they said that we were the ones that were spouting propaganda, now they all admit it.
Yeah, I know. Well, it's been the issue is that mainstream media has always reported aspirations, not reality. And their aspirations were, the Russians are losing, there's no chance they're going to break out. It's been a fiction. And I think this is where the American public has been badly served by, there's been a handful of networks, you and I work for 2, that have, I think, been upfront and trying to tell the truth about the reality. And yet we've been the ones who, were pro-Russian for speaking the truth. I know it's insane. But I think that's the situation right now. They can no longer hide it. It's obvious. And if those cities fall, which, again, I think it's just a matter of weeks, they will not be able to hide that reality. And it's interesting. There was something in the Washington Post, I think, one of the local D.C. publications saying, well, if Donbass falls, that means that the Russians have a gateway into all of Europe. That's like saying if New Jersey invades New York, Oklahoma is going to fall. No, it's not related. It's not relatable. Europe is not in danger. Europe is in danger by poking the bear without being prepared defensively to do anything about it should the bear decide to do something. That's the insanity of this, Jack. Again, if you just look at the numbers and the current readiness status of every major European nation, France, Germany, England, Italy, they don't have any capability to actually do what they propose that they would do, which is be an actual 911 boots on the ground deterrent against Russia. So I don't know what they're smoking, but it's time again for President Trump to kind of insinuate the truth on the discussions and all these leaders and force them to understand what's going on.
And that's really what it comes down to. Who knows? Maybe he's going on his ride along in D.C. today. Maybe he can send some of these leaders on a ride along of Odessa or ride along of Mykolaiv, like we did on Human Events Daily 3 years ago, over 3 years ago now, right after the war started, and saw the destruction and the devastation up close of what's going on, and saying, guys, this thing's only ending in one direction. And for the people who live there, they are not being served by continuing the war. Tony Shaffer, where can people go to follow your content?
Let's check me out on Twitter X. I'm monetizing my account, so you'll be able to get special content. And Jack, you're going to be invited to come on. We're going to do some stuff on 9/11, which I think you may want to participate in next month. So we're going to have some fun.
Have to get our mutual friend Kurt Weldon, one of my first bosses in politics, on and talk about
Kurt's
that
one.
We're
going to be talking a lot about.
He had a great interview with Tucker Carlson and a few others.
Yeah,
we'll be there, ladies and gentlemen. As always, you have my permission to lay ashore.
Hello, my friend. Pat Boone here. You know our country's under financial assault like never before. Our government has put us $34 trillion in debt. The interest alone's more than we spend on military defense. And what's worse, other countries no longer believe the U.S. is a safe place to invest. There's a growing international movement to dump U.S. dollars at a record pace. Some economists say this may signal the end of the dollar. Now, these countries are instead buying gold, and I'm suggesting you do the same. My friends at Swiss America have been helping Americans like you and me for over 40 years to buy physical gold and silver for delivery to our homes or held in our IRAs. I've trusted Swiss America for nearly 25 years now, and you can trust them too. So don't wait. Call or text the number on your screen today for financial peace of mind in these troubling times.
Tired of the hassle and high cost of selling a home? We can help.